Has India's rural consumption improved? That's the big question we are asking. Has, the big question in Q3 itself was that a lot of rural consumption was hit by inflation. But now with better rains and perhaps ebbing of inflation, have things improved in terms of rural consumption? To join us and discuss these issues, we have with us Akshay D'Souza, the Chief Growth and Insights person at Bizom. We have K. Ramakrishnan, Managing Director, South Asia Worldpanel Division at Kantar, and Sachchidanand Shukla, the Chief Economist at Mahindra Group. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in. Let me start with you, Akshay. You must have done your monthly figures in December. Did rural consumption show any improvement?
Thanks, Lata, for having me here. So rural has been a struggle right through Q3 for the industry in FMCG in general. While we did see some kind of a return to positive territory in October, but that was completely on the back of the build-up that was happening to the festival. Post-festival, right after Diwali, there has been a severe drop in sales. Now, there are two things that are weighing heavy for the rural consumer. On the one end, you have Diwali stocks that have not got liquidated in kiranas. So till that does not get liquidated, new stocks billing is going to be very, very difficult for FMCG companies. And that is the most important short-term problem. But the bigger problem and a larger term problem is the whole food insecurity, the inflationary costs that are impacting rural consumption by itself. So people are actually buying smaller, buying essentials only. And that's the real challenge of rural at the moment. As we see inflation kind of soaking down, I think over the next 2-3 months further, I think we will start seeing a rise in consumption further.
Fair enough. Let me come to you, Mr. Ramakrishnan. We were talking very often about shrinkflation. As Akshay also referred, smaller packs was the order of the day. Did you see any improvement come November? I think you have data up to November.
That's correct. So fundamentally, we look at things from the lens of what comes into a household rather than what goes off a shelf of a store. So when you look at it from a household consumption lens, we find that the numbers have been more or less flat in rural compared to previous quarter to now. Now, your specific question on shrinkflation, the pack sizes in rural were already small in comparison to urban. So to that extent, there isn't much to go down further. That said, there was an 8% shrink in the average grammage, if you can see. You can call it grammage, literage, units, any of those things. The average grammage dropped by about 8% in rural in comparison to the same period last year. So to that extent, does it mean shrinkflation? What is actually happening is that the number of trips that an individual is making to a store to purchase or a household is making to a store to purchase has actually gone up. So what's happening is the way the rural consumer is managing is going more often to the store, but getting lesser units per trip. So that's the way they are managing.
Okay. So overall, you would say that in third quarter, the crib of the FMCG companies is not gone, that rural is still not ticking for them.
Yeah, it's more or less flat is what I would say.
Okay. Akshay, you would agree?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're seeing with rural is obviously that they are only buying and focusing on essentials at the moment.
Okay.
There is not a major focus on the discretionary side of the business.
All right. Okay, now let me get some idea of where the trends are headed from Sachchidanand. Sachin, what's the forecast that you are making? Good monsoons, good Rabi. Should we see an improvement? Are you seeing any recovery in rural wages, the data that comes out from the Labour Ministry?
So happy New Year, Lata. I think the New Year brings some positive changes on the ground. We are seeing some early signs of shifting of momentum. And I think what is happening, Lata, is when we look ahead, we see that the rural is going to benefit from almost polar opposite, or as we call it, the antipodal reference with respect to the Kharif season, right? We are expecting a better Rabi crop. There is an upswing in government policy support. And this is feeding off some improvement in labor markets as we see it. So I think when I look ahead, what's changing is I think Rabi crop and the prospects are looking very positive. Wheat, for example, the main crop is up so in sowing terms 4%. Moisture levels are good. Reservoir levels are about 19% higher YY. terms of trade, I think one gentleman just referred to that. I think that has narrowed. And when you look at it, at the peak about a quarter back, the difference between output and input prices on the farm side was about 25 to 30%. And then that has narrowed significantly to just 10%. Another positive that we're seeing is mandi prices for most key crops are higher than MSPs.
Okay.
That means more incomes, and therefore the ability and willingness of the farmer or people on the rural side is going to be positive. And the last, but the most important thing is that government spending momentum has swung. I tell you, in terms of sheer quantum, in Q1, the government spending, and when I say government spending, I'm talking about central government, agriculture and rural schemes, it was minus 19%. Q2, it was minus 6%. And when we look at recent data, that number has changed significantly in terms of a positive swing.
Okay.
So if you put all these 5 factors together, we are seeing signs of change on the rural demand side. But yes, like it has been alluded, there is a K-shaped recovery that we're seeing by way of anecdotes.
One more point, Sachin. The government has actually halved the free grains, right? They were getting 5 kilos in NFSA and 5 kilos in PM, Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. Now that's going to be only one of them because the schemes have merged. Will that tell on the extent of rural demand for FMCG? It's a little less cash.
So, yes, I think that will have a slightly positive impact on the fiscal side. But when it comes to the real impact on the ground, I think what matters is procurement that is going on right now. Procurement is about 18 or 19% higher. And there are multiple other things, like I said. There are other schemes where the government is spending, and also the mandi prices. So that is one of the factors.
So you would be confident of Q4, the current quarter and the next in terms of rural demand?
Absolutely. So I think we need to see if this sustains. But as of now, like I said, the new year has brought in some positive changes on the ground, and we're seeing a positive.
Okay. Mr. Ramakrishnan, is there any product-wise data that you can bring to the table? Is there... go ahead, please.
Yeah, so fundamentally, you raised the point about the free grains being halved, etc. But there is one thing which is contributing to the basket itself, or the amount of money available to buy their FMCG basket, which is the fact that a whole lot of high-priced hygiene products have crashed. Because of the fact that we have come out of the pandemic, things like sanitizers, things like hand wash, which on a per-unit basis cost a lot of money, are not being bought. And there's a steep fall in their purchases from last year compared to this year. And that leaves a little bit of money for FMCG to see a green shoot there. So that's very clear on that. Okay. Then on a product front, we're definitely seeing from a household consumption lens, compared to last year, we are actually seeing sharp increases in 2 specific categories, which is one is snacking, which is salty snacks and stuff like that. We're seeing a sharp increase in urban as well as rural. And if you look at soft drinks, that is seeing the sharpest increase compared to last year, bottled soft drinks, if you look at it. Because fundamentally last year, exactly during the peak season, we were in the middle of, we had the...
the Omicron,
We had the Omicron, and so therefore there's a huge drop in consumption of, from a household lens, of bottled soft drinks, which has now come back, and therefore that is showing a sharp increase as well. So these are 2 categories where we can see sharp increases. Overall hygiene, if you leave the specific pandemic-related hygiene products such as sanitizers and hand wash may have come down, but overall hygiene has definitely seen an uptick, which is, let's say, things like toilet bathroom cleaners, floor cleaners, fabric wash, and all of these things have seen some amount of increase. That would be my take on the category-wise information.
Okay. Akshay, I know I invited all of you for an assessment of rural demand, but this morning we got some disturbing notes from, again, analysts who observe the market, that discretionary consumption is weakening. Is it that the pent-up demand has, is spent now? But are you even agreeing with this observation that consumer discretionaries, and this is both rural and urban, overall, any chink in the armor?
So yes, the discretionary consumption has definitely been under challenge. That is a fact. You look at categories like in personal care, you look at categories like chocolates and confectionaries. All of these are seeing a challenge post-festival. So There was some kind of a bump up during the festival period itself, but right after it, we saw a drop. Now the good part here is if consumer businesses still are focusing on building a direct distribution network to rural, moving away from wholesaling, right? I think and that trend continues very strong. So I think from an economy standpoint, moment you see a challenge of inflation dropping, the moment you look at businesses trying to offer greater value to consumers back again, because if you look at it, the whole of last year was largely price-led growth for brands, for consumer brands. This year, they'll have to focus on consumption growth because there is as much as the price-led growth could have taken them, and they've kind of leveraged that quite a bit. So I think the key going forward is consumption-led growth, and I think you will start seeing much more value, and at which point you will also see maybe consumption coming back from rural.
Okay. Well, let me ask one general question of all of you in terms of your final take on state of consumption, and I am not only referring to rural at this point in time. Sachchidanand, what's your sense? Will we get back to the old mojo, the 2015, 2017 mojo in terms of consumption growth starting this year, because we have definitely put the pandemic behind us?
I think it will take quite some doing, Lata. I think those days are not back yet. But what I can tell you is, in terms of signals that we see, there is a definite rotation, signs of rotation from urban to rural demand that we see. Some of the factors that I mentioned, and also when we look ahead, let's not forget that there are going to be about 9 odd state elections, and this year is a run up to the general elections.
Yeah.
We do believe that the government support to agriculture in particular is going to remain robust. And as I mentioned, spending on rural as well as agricultural schemes has been on an upswing. The only missing factor has been state spending, especially the capex part. If somehow some of the key states also join in, I do see this possibility of rotation from urban to rural demand. Having said that, coming back to your earlier part of the question, Lata, we are still seeing signs of a very pronounced K-shaped recovery even on the rural side. So just to give you a couple of examples, when it comes to things like footwear, urban sort of footwear is doing well as compared to the rural one. Even in the marriage season, the uptick, and this is some anecdotal data, definitely not some time series, but say things like washing machines, refrigerators, phones, two-wheelers, the entry segments are not doing well even on the rural side. So broad-based consumption is still a bit far off, and it will take some doing, sustained spending by the government.
Okay.
I'm not talking about a stimulus, I'm talking about relief. And some growth in the denominator, I mean the GDP, will probably lead us there. But there is some distance to come.
All right, got that. So we are not back to the pre-COVID mojo, certainly not to the 2015-2017 mojo, but there could be a rotation from urban to rural, maybe because of elections. So you're actually you're taking us to the pre-budget discussions. We will do that starting next week. Ramakrishnan, your view. If we were to draw a curve from 2015, 2016 onwards, are we catching up?
So we are on the way there is what I would say. I mean, I
but
would
we are
say
a distance away?
We're a distance away, but we are getting there for sure. I would like to be a complete optimist in this front because we are seeing...
No, are the numbers saying that?
The numbers are saying minor recoveries. So minor recoveries, I'd like to believe if you project will get to that level. So, but it's early days yet.
Okay. And Akshay?
Yeah, so I think the good news is last 3 months, urban has been positive. So I think there is not really a challenge of growth year on year on the urban side. That's very, very clear. The challenge has been only rural. I think the rabi crop is obviously going to be a key determinant going forward.
Sure.
Inflation heading in the right direction is very, very positive.
Okay.
I think if this continues, I think a couple of months down, I think you'll probably see a very, very different picture.
Okay. That's good to hear that a mix of government spending and reduction in inflation could mean a rotation, that the consumption will move and come from the rural areas. But there is still a bit of skepticism on whether we have got back to the old mojo. Thank you very much, Akshay, Mr. Ramakrishnan and Sachin for joining us. We have to wrap up on Bazaar on that note. Chartbusters up next.